Hey everybody, this is your host of The Future of Everything, Russ Altman. Today we're bringing to you a timely best of episode. Given the recent advances in generative AI tools like large language models and ChatGPT, people are thinking about the interaction between computers and humans. And a couple of years ago, I interviewed Jeff Hancock, a Stanford professor of communication, whose research explores the psychological and interpersonal processes that are at play when people communicate both with each other, that is, other humans, as well as with computers. At the time of this conversation, ChatGPT wasn't even available yet, but Jeff's insights about how such technologies impact the ways we communicate seem more relevant than ever. I hope you'll take another listen and enjoy. Before we get started, a reminder that if you're enjoying the show, please consider sharing it with friends, family, and colleagues. Personal recommendations are the best way to spread the news about everything. Humans have evolved to communicate with other humans over millions of years. We used voice, then we learned how to write, then we invented video. But recently, our ability to communicate at a distance and to many, many people has exploded with the rise of social media. What's also exploded is the ability of computers to generate text, and that's becoming ubiquitous. It started with innocuous things like spell check. You get that in your word processor. Hey, you misspelled the word labor. Here's a different way to spell it. Now word processors don't just check spelling, they give you opinions about your word usage and your sentence construction and your grammar. And now powerful AI systems are emerging that can actually generate text that is not just human-like, but we will learn in some cases it's more effective than human-generated text at conveying certain messages. So when we get on social media, how do we know who we're communicating with? Is it a human or is it a computer? Do we care? Many times we don't know, but we probably should care. So we're in this new world of communications where communication partners may not be human, they may be AI systems, they may help us refine our message, but they also can be used by others to refine deceptive messages. This challenges our basic assumptions about the purpose, method, and goals of communication, and has implications for how much we trust computational systems. Professor Jeff Hancock is a professor of communications at Stanford University. His work focuses on understanding the psychological and interpersonal processes that are at play when people communicate, both with each other and with computers. This includes interactions with AI systems that can generate text. These capabilities may change the skill set that writers need in the future. Maybe you can sketch out some ideas and the computer just fills in the rest. So Jeff, you work to understand communication dynamics in social media. And when I think about that, I could imagine that mostly it's about humans talking with humans. But I know that you're also interested in humans talking to basically computers or AIs. So tell me, first of all, how do we think about social media? Are we talking to other people? Are we talking to computers? Or is it much more complicated than that?
It's a blend of all of those things. And what I think I'm most excited about right now is that we are talking to each other, but computers are doing a lot of the work for us. So as an example, when we were talking about the time for this interview, Gmail would have said, when you suggest this time, some options, sounds good, that works, or I can't make it. And I could have just picked one of those and sent it to you. I wouldn't have typed anything. A machine would have written my message to you. You wouldn't have known anything about it. And over 16 billion of those are sent a day just on Google's platform. So machines are working not just to talk to us, but they're talking to us on our behalf.
And so they're understanding and kind of doing surveillance on our conversations. So here, I guess, so the first question is, should we be worried about this? You actually presented this just now as a fairly positive thing, like we're doing a relatively innocuous scheduling task. There's a little bit of an AI assistant who's watching, who's saying, hey, Russ, you might want to just say, that works great for me. Should I be worried about that? Or is this the future and we should just get used to it?
We don't know. You know why, Russ? Nobody thinks about this. As far as we can tell, there's very little research on it, but it's clearly having an effect. I just don't know whether it's positive or negative. I can imagine both. So one example we've found is that when we look at these smart responses in particular, they're way more positive than if a human was doing it. So sounds great, sounds good. all those things. Whereas if we were doing it ourselves, we wouldn't write as positively. It makes sense. If you're a company, you don't want to screw it up the wrong way. You'd rather screw it up being too nice than not. But is that a good thing? Is it going to make us more positive, or will you then react?
I could have said, if you insist.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, we can
I
meet.
guess so.
It actually reminds me of my favorite New Yorker cartoon where a guy is saying, no, Thursday doesn't work. How about never? Does never work for you?
They should train the AI on some New Yorker cartoons. I think that would be good.
I'm sorry, you were saying.
Well, yeah. So we don't know whether that's a good. I mean, is it making us nicer people? I doubt it. Right? It's just going to change the way we're talking, but people are adaptable or react to it. But you can also imagine, like the machines are homogenizing our language, so it's not as diverse. If you're a young Black woman and you're applying for a job, you're going to face multiple discriminations, right? So you're young, she's female, she's Black. Well, if she uses some AI to help her write and sound, what's trustworthy for AI right now would be older white male, the part of like the way that speakers on TV, the anchors were always older white male. So that's what's considered trustworthy. So if she uses that, she overcomes those biases. So for her, that could be a positive. But for society, that seems pretty negative, that we're going to, emphasize one language and make that the primary. So I see lots of possible advantages and disadvantages, but they're totally unknown right now.
Yes, and that's a great hypothetical you just raised, because the other issue, I'm sure, because I know some young people, I used to be one, but I know some now, there's an issue of authenticity. Is that my voice? And like, do I want somebody to hire me if they're not hearing my voice, or if my voice has been filtered? And it's related to this really interesting observation you said about the positivity. Again, that's part of like the message that I'm sending when I do communication. Of course, there's all kinds of subtle signals I'm sending in my choice of words and my choice of responses. Do you study the impact of that filter, that kind of AI filter, on human relations? Maybe somebody gets the idea that I'm a much more positive person than I really am.
Yeah, well, so not only do you send those subtle signals, right, and they're naturally done, you don't really think about them, they're sort of unconsciously produced. So not only do you send those, but I, as the listener, the observer, I pick up on those, and I use really finely tuned, over our whole evolution as a species, senses of those things to make really fast judgments about, for example, how competent you are, how trustworthy and honest you seem. So, and that's good. And, even when we're, let's say, looking at Airbnb profiles, so I want to stay at this guy Russ's house while he's gone, or is he going to murder me when I go there? So we make these decisions all the time.
More likely bore you with talking, but
yeah, right. That's right. So
kill you with
me when I
boredom.
Get there. So we make these decisions, even though there's text and there's photos I've been able to adjust, and I can still use those senses. But if the machine is writing everything for you, it says, okay, instead of Russ writing it, it's a hard thing. Airbnb will develop some tech, which they will, to Russ just say, here's my social media profile. Airbnb AI, please write my profile for me.
Wow.
This is already available on LinkedIn, for example. So now my finely tuned senses about judging other people are being based off of not the person and those unconscious signals, but a machine owned by some company.
So you mentioned generating more text. And so the first example was relatively short little snippets, I think pretty innocuous. And now you're referencing writing entire tracks of text. So where are we in the ability of, for people who don't follow this every day, where are we in the ability of computers to write credible human-like text? And what are some of the early uses of it that you're seeing?
Yeah, this is a really exciting time. So somebody that's been looking at text for a long time, I remember chat bots being huge in the 90s. And then in 2015, they kind of got big again. I remember looking at me like, what year is this? Well, now, just in the last 3 years, there's been really huge advances in things called large language models. And they are basically taking in all of human language that's been recorded, so just sucking in the whole internet, and then developing intensely complicated systems with hundreds of billions of parameters to produce novel new text based on things that we can ask it. So the one that we use a lot and is really important and popular right now is GPT-3. And it really is a leapfrog ahead. Whenever we show people in the lab, we're getting people to use it right now. Everybody is just like, oh my God. And one of the questions that comes up, so one of my students, Hannah Michkowski, is having people work with GPT-3 to write things that they're an expert on or a novice on. And one thing that they've been mentioning a lot is that it either sounds like them, and sometimes it really does, or it doesn't. And people will be like, wow, I would have written that. And then when we ask them, for example, how much would you say you did this? When they're using GPT-3, they way overestimate how much they did. They really take ownership of it. It's really cool. I remember getting it to write a hip hop song for me, and it did a good job. And I showed my wife, being like, look what I wrote. I just wrote this. You know,
so give me, so just to dive into that a little bit, what is your actual contribution to this collaboration with the GPT-3? Did you give like a theme? I want to talk about what it's like to be a professor in Palo Alto, and then it wrote the rest, or what was the level of contribution of the two players, you and the computer?
Yeah, so in the first time we started using this, we were trying to create pro-vaccine messages to see if GPT-3 could beat the CDC. And the short answer is yes, shockingly. The CDC.
Okay, so do a deep dive. That sounds really...
Okay, so the CDC is the one that's driving worldwide messaging for why people should get pro-vaccinated. You'd think that they would use like really good communication, hopefully hired communication experts. So what we did is we said to GPT-3, you literally write in regular language. You don't have to program. You say, this is a message to convince people to get a vaccine. Right? And then it will write them. And we would get it to do that many times. We had it do it about 50 times, and we took the top 10 of those messages. And then we showed those 10 messages and 10 from the CDC to many, many, many participants, well over 1,000. And we got them to judge them on classic health persuasion metrics like, this is credible. This is something I believe, and I should do it. GPT-3 beats CDC, and not even by a little amount. And why? Well, it seems that it writes a little bit more colloquial. It's not as stilted in formal language. And the really cool thing is that we asked if the participants had been vaccinated. This was early on, and it was about a third of them had not. And the difference was even bigger for them. They were even more convinced.
Okay, so a couple of detailed questions. Did you give it guidance as to audience, is my first question. Did you tell it who we're going after?
We didn't, and you're totally picking up on what the next study is. This is something in marketing called narrative wedging, which is you got to tell a young Black man in an urban area one kind of message, and a white guy living in a rural conservative area a very different message, right? And the CDC did not, of course, right? It was pushed out of the same. So GPT-3 allows you to do that. That's why I was actually creating the hip hop song, and I also had it write a country song for me to do full stereotypes of those kinds of areas. And that's the next step. So even without telling GPT-3 or giving any information about the audience, it still beat it at the general level. So we're working on the narrative wedging now, and it's really impressive.
And then my second question is, what did you give it guidelines about the length? Like, did you say keep it short and sweet? Did you say whatever you want? Because I'm sure this is an aspect of whether people pick up something. Is like you look at it and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read that. It's too long. So how did it know how long to go on with its argument?
Yeah, in that case, we cheated a little bit. We would take the message from the CDC. We say, okay, that's about 100 words, say. And we told GPT-3 to write something the same length. That was sort of like a experimental psychology control, is kind of keep the stimuli the same. Yeah. So
AI really is generating seriously good text. As an editor, let me ask you, did you have to edit these significantly? Did these come in similar to what you would do for a student or a research associate, or did they come in at a remarkably good level of kind of writing basics?
It was a mix. So we ran this prompt 50 times. 10 of them almost didn't have to touch anything. And then probably another 10 were pretty good. And the other 20 to 30 were like, idiotic or not good, like clearly problematic. And so it's never perfect. But the thing with it is you can just keep hitting that, run.
Run me again.
Yeah, when we show students here at Stanford, you just see this light go off of like, why would I ever start writing a paper from blank on my own again? And not just students, me. Like I've even done things. This is the beginning of a psychology paper. It'll do things.
And it just fills stuff out.
It'll mimic what it understands as that. And so if it's consumed text related to that, then it can mimic it really well.
Okay, so that's great, because what you just said is a perfect setup for the next part of our conversation, which is, when I get work from a student, I'm kind of making assumptions that it is. In fact, I've told them, I want this to be your work. You can talk to your other fellow students. And I guess I could say you could also talk to some AI, but what you hand into me needs to be your work. I'm now starting to feel a little bit like a dinosaur. Are those the right instructions? And do I have to worry that I'm not actually evaluating the student? I'm evaluating their ability as a technologist to combine the capabilities of AI with a few fragmentary ideas. Should I reward them for embracing the future, or should I penalize them for not doing what I told them, which was to write a damn essay?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think at the extremes, it's pretty easy to make the answer, right? So if they're writing it all on their own, right, then sure. And if they do nothing but the AI does it all, probably that's not okay. Right. But there's already Microsoft Word will complete sentences for you, right? Yes. So if they do that every time they write, is that them writing, or is that the system finishing their thoughts? We don't think about autocorrect. We don't think about spelling as AI, even though spelling was developed here, spell check was developed here at Stanford as a form of AI. And so there's another version of this, which is that AI is just what we think is fancy and new.
Right.
And we could imagine a time in the future where your skill set is not just going to be, it used to be writing and penmanship, and then it was typing and your ability to type and edit. Maybe the next iteration is, how good are you at getting a system to help you write your thing?
Yeah.
And if I have a number of students that are going into marketing, and what I've said to them over the last year and a half is that if you don't know how to use this tool to do marketing tasks, you're probably behind the ball.
This is The Future of Everything with Russ Altman. More with Jeff Hancock next. Welcome back to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman, and I'm speaking with Jeff Hancock of Stanford University about AI-generated text and its ability to be useful and high quality. Now, I want to ask him about the possibility that these capabilities get used for misinformation and disinformation. Jeff tells us that AI systems will be able to create a huge amount of false information that will flood our social media feeds.
Right. As with any good technology, bad actors can make negative uses of it. And certainly that is one of the major concerns that we see with these large language models. So right now, social media has made disinformation and misinformation quite cheap because you can pay people very small amounts of money to produce a lot. With something like GPT-3, you actually can create it at infinite with only paying for computing and electrical costs. So we could be on the verge of a huge new deluge of this kind of disinformation. As of right now, most of these large language models are pretty locked down. You have to have limits on access to that, and that's been working so far, but it's only a matter of time.
What do you see as the early dis and misinformation applications that we'll see? I mean, you mentioned that some folks are already paying humans to generate these messages. What are the most high stakes misinformation that you imagine emerging? And because that sounds like it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, well, we're interviewing right now during the depths of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And one of the hallmarks of this invasion is the information warfare that's taking place alongside the kinetic. And it's very clear that the Russians are using disinformation. They're quite skilled at it, although it seems to have not been as good outside of Russia as it is inside. And once Russians are able to get a hold of this kind of technology, it's not clear that they have it yet. We'll just see it flooding the zone sort of idea, which is their main goal now. The next phase, of course, will be deep fakes, where the similar kinds of technologies will be used to generate video that's not. Now, this has been a threat that we've been worried about for a while. My colleague Jeremy Balance and I published a whole specialty show on this last year. And so far, just not seen it as a real threat. I think computer scientists are going to be better at detecting those visual kinds of fakes than they are the text ones.
Yep.
And so at least we're keeping deep fakes at bay so far. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
It's interesting because I was worried. I know that there is a huge amount of, we are, in fact, talking in the middle of the Ukraine crisis. And for those of you in the future, this was a big deal for us at the time. Mm-hmm. I'm worried, and I just making this up, I have no data for this at all, that if news of the Ukrainian suffering got to Russia, that it would be dismissed as deep fakes. And I don't know, has there been any kind of use of that deep fake idea to actually discredit real data or real feeds?
Yes, absolutely. This is something called the liar's dividend, where the person is in a deceptive position. So usually you're worse off in an information game. It benefits you to lie a lot and get everybody to think that everyone is lying, because no one will believe anybody then. So this is called the liar's dividend. It comes at huge cost for the overall game. So let's say it's a presidential thing. If a president starts saying everybody's lying, you can't trust the election, that's could be good for that individual, but it's really bad for the system. So you definitely, the Ukrainians will be, or the Russians, probably the Ukrainians as well, will be saying this. We have some evidence that Russians are doing it already. The limited polling coming out of Russia now suggests that there's support for this special military operation. They don't call it a war. And that suggests that the propaganda at least is being effective at some level.
So, war is a big deal, but I also want to briefly discuss the use of these technologies. And I don't even know if deception is the right word, but advertising and marketing, let's say in the US. You even said that some of your students will be going into marketing. There's a fine line between pushing your product and its strengths, perhaps not focusing on the weaknesses. Do we risk the ability to be too persuasive? Is that even a thing? Being too persuasive because AI are so locked into the demographics and to the things that work, it creates perhaps unfair advantages in the marketplace, or is that not even a thing?
I think it will be a thing. It'll be unfair advantages in two particular ways, I think. So imagine AI that can be actually trained to be optimized. And let's say you optimize it for sales. So I want to sell my widget and I have more money, so I can buy better AI that's been trained to be even more persuasive. And I use that to send my messages to my potential consumers. Right. So it exacerbates the wealth effect. But also, we just had a study come out where we were looking at who uses these AI tools so far in 2021 and 22. And they are not evenly distributed. And sadly, like everything, women are less likely to use AI tools, people of color are less likely to have access to them, and poor people, of course. So one of the things that the HAI, the AI Institute here at Stanford, is really trying to work on is making sure that we don't exacerbate these inequalities, because that is definitely a concern I have.
As we move to that, let's talk about intervention. So you have a profound understanding of the human-human interactions on social media, the increasing amount of human-computer interactions. Are there things that people can do who are worried that they're losing their humanity? They like social media, but they're worried that in some way they're losing some humanity in their interactions.
Yes, absolutely. It's so easy to get caught into kind of like a presentism bias where like the way things are now are the way they'll always be. Fake news isn't new. We've dealt with it before. And I just want to assure your viewers that we will adapt and deal with it. So lots of things have to be done. The platforms have to become better. We need better legal frameworks. But at the individual level, we can become more resilient. So one set of tips I have for your listeners is, if you're an older adult, you're being targeted more than others with disinformation. Part of that is because you're more civic minded, you're more likely to volunteer and to vote. You're also on average wealthier. And so that's why disinformation folks go after you. You can be better because you are going to be the defense from sharing this kind of stuff. Two really simple things. Anytime you encounter something on social media that you want to quickly share or that gets you angry or upset or really excited, is to pause, think about the accuracy of that. That turns out to be a huge limit on sharing. That's what we have to stop, is the sharing of it. If I see it, it's not that big of a deal. If I share it to my network, that's a big deal.
Right. So the forwarding instinct.
That's right.
You need to do a pause and say, why am I so worked up? Is it based on reality? And what is going to be the impact of sending this to my 200 closest friends?
That's right. And as older generations also have this more like shepherding concern for family and friends. Like, it's a really positive thing. And so that's why they often do share. But that's what's being manipulated. So stopping, thinking about accuracy, not sharing inaccurate stuff. And the two ways you can kind of deal with that, if you're worried about whether it's accurate or not, honestly though, just thinking about accuracy goes a long ways, is use the most powerful information tool we've developed, Google. Just Google the thing you're looking at. Google is extremely good at highlighting whether it's problematic or not. And then for images, which we've talked a little bit about, you can do what's called a reverse image search. So you take the image from whatever you're looking at, you can copy it and you paste it into that Google bar, which seems weird, but you can do that. And it will look up that image and find out where it originally was from, and Google will flag it whether it's problematic or not. So it's a really powerful tool.
I had no idea. This just became an unintended headline of this interview. You can paste an image into Google.
Yeah.
And it'll give you stuff about that image.
That's right.
Fantastic. So those are actually very useful. And I know that you've also published a paper that showed that we might not be as bad as we think at falling for bad information. Tell me about that paper and what does it tell us about the potential future?
Yeah, really important thing is that most people, most of the time, are not encountering disinformation. Even though it seems like, because we talk about it so much, that it's everywhere, most people do not encounter it. So believe the news. If you have a local newspaper or an app or of the news, that's where you should get your news. Keep your social in social and your news in the news.
Okay, and then that's really good news because the disinformation is not as rampant as we're thinking, and you've shown some ability to triage it, and especially through your tips, kind of make sure that before you start spreading it, you kind of check the provenance.
That's right. I just worry that by us talking about disinformation all the time, we make people suspicious of everything. And that means also the real news, which makes up almost 100% of the news that people consume.
It's actually another form of this liar's dividend that you were talking about before. Thanks to Jeff Hancock. That was the future of human-computer interactions. Thanks for tuning into this episode. With over 250 episodes in our archive, you have instant access to a huge array of discussions on the future of pretty much everything. If you're enjoying the show, a reminder to please consider sharing it with your friends and colleagues. Personal recommendations are the best way for us to grow the show. You can connect with me on X or Twitter at RB Altman, and you can connect with Stanford Engineering at Stanford ENG.